All right, good morning, everyone. It is 10:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started with this morning's workshop. Just want to say welcome to the Opioid Safety Net Tender Training with the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. We are live on Facebook, and I just want to open it up for our presenters to introduce themselves.
Hello there, everyone. My name is Daniel Morton Luna, and I am a community outreach specialist and AmeriCorps Vista serving with the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. Thanks for having me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ariane Jones, and I'm an AmeriCorps Vista and community outreach specialist with the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. Thank you for having me. Lori.
Ayakwi, Lori Nesbitt from the Yurok Tribe. I'm the Opioid Program Manager. Welcome, everybody, and looking forward to the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate you doing this training today. It's going to be awesome to get some people, engaged and trained up on how to use Narcan. Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you to our presenters for being present. It is week 4 of the Wellness and Recovery series. We're on the last day of this week. And then we have one more week. We're almost done. It's sad because it's been such a great month with everyone. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who have joined us and participated. It's been wonderful, and we appreciate you all being a part of this. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Malaya Florendo. I'm the trainer with RX Safe Del Norte. I use the gender pronouns she, her, hers. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for being here. For those watching on Facebook Live, we do want to remind you that there is about a 45-second delay. So you will be seeing things a little slower than we would be here. So we want to encourage everyone watching to ask questions and for clarification. You're totally welcome to leave them in the comments. There is a delay, so we will wait until the open time for questions, and we will open it up to our presenters to answer the questions. So just leave them in the comments and we'll have someone monitoring for your questions. For those in the Zoom, just remember to stay muted and your video off. And if you have a question, you're welcome to raise your hand during the open question time or leave a question in the chat. And as always, before we get started, we'll go through a little bit of housekeeping. Our group agreements, as always, respect and kindness are key. If you are not being respectful and it becomes a persistent issue, you will be removed. Please show tolerance and sensitivity for differences. Participants in this group come from different cultural, racial, gender, and sexually oriented backgrounds. So please be aware and sensitive to judgmental comments. Try and use positive language, and definitely stay away from using racial, homophobic, and any degrading remarks. It is a safe space, and it is free of judgment. So it's all right to disagree with someone else's point of view, but we don't put each other down for it. This is a space where participants should feel comfortable to be themselves, share their thoughts and any ideas without any worry of punishment or judgment. For those who are presenting and watching with us, if you are sharing stories and any personal information, please try and not use specific names in your stories, because using names often aids in the spreads of rumors and detracts from the point of view of the information trying to be communicated. So we just ask, out of respect for those maybe mentioned in your stories, try and use the term someone or someone I know, just out of respect for their identity. And again, as always, if you have questions or you don't understand some of the information provided, ask for clarification and ask questions in the chat all you want. And we'll make sure to get to those as soon as we open it up for questions. Awesome. And we do always want to recognize that some of the conversations we might be having today may bring up some feelings, concerns, or emotions that may make you feel like you need to reach out to somebody, and we want to encourage that. So if these conversations do bring up some heavy feelings, we have provided some numbers here, such as the mental health hotline for Del Norte, as well as some of the 24-hour crisis services available. So if you are feeling, that some of these topics may be heavy on your mind and you need to reach out, we encourage it. As far as informed consent and privacy, each person's participation in this presentation is voluntary, so please respect the privacy of others and do not share personal information with anyone else. This training is being recorded and is live on social media. If you are participating via Zoom, please turn your video camera off and stay muted. And as always, we want to acknowledge the lands we're meeting across today. I personally am tuning in from Tolowa Dene land, so I just want to acknowledge that. And a few of the tribes that we do want to recognize people may be meeting from, such as Tolowa Dene, Yurok, Karuk, Hupa, Wiyat, and many rancherias such as Elk Valley, Rezagini, Big Lagoon, Trinidad, Blue Lake, Table Bluff, and Bronerville. The indigenous peoples who lived together and cared for this land and each other since time immemorial. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have been the stewards of this land for generations. We know the effects of colonization have impacted indigenous people disproportionately, and we hope that through this series we can learn together to help heal a healthy future. So again, if you are coming from any of these areas or any other areas, make sure you acknowledge the land that you're on today, as always, out of respect for the land. So thank you, everyone. Whoever's tuning in from anywhere, we appreciate having you today. And we do want to remind you that there will be a link for an evaluation at the end of this training. So make sure you keep a lookout for that in the comments. We'll make sure to include it in there. And make sure you stay tuned for the whole training so that you can get your Narcan. Awesome. Well, I am going to hand it over to our wonderful presenters today.
All right, thanks, Malaya. So Ariane's sharing her screen right now, and this will be the presentation. Just kind of a quick word before we start the presentation. I'd like to kind of give a little bit of background about where we came up with the name for it. So the Yurok people are traditionally a fishing people, and they use nets on the river currently in order to fish salmon that swim up the Klamath. And to be a net tender is actually to hold a great deal of responsibility within the community, because it helps put the food on the table. But right now we're teaching everyone about a similarly responsible role. But these net tenders are safety net tenders, because our opioid safety net has been falling apart, and we need to put it back together so that we can, make sure that no one else dies from an opioid overdose. We need to catch all those people and really, save lives here. And that's exactly what this presentation boiled down to, its essence is really all about.
Yes, so along with what Daniel said, we really want to get as many people trained as possible, just to avoid anyone passing away from an overdose. Lori, would you like to introduce yourself? No? Okay, so I guess we can go on.
It caught me off guard. Hi, Lori Nesbitt, Yurok tribal member and program manager, the opioid program manager at the Yurok tribe in the tribal court department.
All right, thank you so much for sharing, Lori.
Yeah. So we're going to get into our objectives here for today. So the way that we'll break down this training today is first we'll increase opioid awareness. So we'll be talking about what opioids are, how they are kind of a dangerous substance and the risks associated with them. And we'll talk about what an overdose actually is. And something that we want to include in this conversation as well is sort of how we end up with this situation kind of on our hands, where we are struggling with an opioid epidemic in the North Coast region, and in general a polysubstance epidemic. So we want to touch a little bit on each one of those, some of the risk factors along with opioid overdose, and just kind of build our base knowledge before we go into how to administer naloxone. In that case, and when we get into that section, we'll be showing a training video actually that RX Safe Del Norte, just to give them credit, they did a great training video, and so we'll be borrowing from that, and we'll show you guys the scare me tactic. And then at the very end, we'll be identifying harm reduction resources and services, and these are also going to include treatment services as well in Del Norte, Humboldt counties, and also on tribal lands, specifically within the Yurok and Humboldt territory. And so we just ask, as questions come up for people, please write them down in either the Zoom chat or the comments on Facebook or wherever you're watching this stream. Write those questions down, because we do have folks who are monitoring those questions, and at the very end of the presentation, we'll return to address each one of those. So we definitely appreciate when people have clarifying questions, because we want to make sure that you are as prepared as possible before going into a response scenario. Yeah. No further ado, we'll jump in. Ariane, I'll let you take it away.
Yes, so what is an opioid? So an opioid is derived from the poppy plant, and it's typically any drug that is used to manage pain. This can be physical pain. Medications include morphine, codeine, and it's like liquid. It can be like a pill, closest similar to heroin. Daniel, is there anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, so I mean, typically opioids are really strong painkillers, and a lot of people know the street drug heroin. That is a big opioid. Other things that we may have heard of is morphine, codeine, methadone, hydrocodone, oxycodone. Some of the pharmaceutical names for our opioids are Percocet, Oxycontin. Let's see, some of these, Dilaudid is another one, Cadian. And then there's another opioid that's kind of been a big one, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation as well, but fentanyl is another opioid. And these are just essentially painkillers, and they're very effective at what they do, but they also have high risks associated with them.
And I just wanted to add that most of the time these opioids are prescribed after major surgeries. So they are a painkiller, but they do have very dangerous risks to them. Okay.
So really often a lot of people or at least, it's hard to kind of get an understanding of what addiction actually is. And I think it's different for each one of the drugs. However, when it comes to opioids, the way that our bodies get physically dependent on it and then actually, create that addiction, or as we call it, opioid use disorder, there's a couple of things that go on in the brain that I'm going to explain. So in the image to the left of the screen, we see this kind of like normal brain versus brain on opioids. And now these blue dots, they're endorphins. Those are actually our natural, like our body actually produces opioids. And so these endorphins that our brains produce, they help us get by on a daily basis. When we do exercise, our bodies are going through a certain amount of stress, and those endorphins are produced to kind of help it recover and help it relax through that stress. And it's a very natural process. And in addition, there are, like when you eat spicy food, that's another trigger for endorphins to come up and kind of help your body recover, help your mouth recover. And actually, when your endorphins stimulate the opioid receptors in your brain, you get a rush of dopamine. And that's why, you have people who really enjoy spicy food, even though it hurts to eat. I myself really enjoy spicy food. And it's all kind of associated with that. However, there is a very different situation with this chemical when we're putting it in our bodies and it's sort of an extra, outside of what our body's already normally producing. And so when we put opioids into our bodies, what's going on is we're essentially taking care of a function that our brain would already naturally do for itself. And so our brain ends up backing off. And that's why you see on this image and on the right side of the normal brain, the brain on opioids, there are less blue dots. Your brain is trying to kind of figure out a balance to restore because, all of these opioid receptors are getting way too much action, and they're releasing all this dopamine, which in the short term feels really good for someone who's taking the opioids, but in the long term, it's creating a dependency, because what ends up happening is when these red dots go away, the blue dots don't just come right on back, immediately. It takes time for the brain to heal and then get back into the rhythm of making those things. And usually within that time, people are going through an extreme amount of pain, because even little things will bother them more than they would a normal brain that's already producing the opioids. And they're getting less dopamine too, so their mood is strongly affected as well, and they tend to feel very sick. And this is what we call withdrawals. As you can see on the image to the very, very right, you've got this brain that's very full of opioids, and in the meantime, and in the time being, it can feel good for that person, but it really is setting them up for a pretty destructive kind of series of events when the opioids sort of run out and their brain is still left to recover.
All right, Daniel, thanks for that.
Yeah.
And then we can move on to what is an opioid overdose. So what happens when you have extreme amounts of opioids in your body, it becomes a toxic amount. So some of the symptoms and signs of somebody who has overdosed includes them not being responsive. Breath can be either shallow or they may not be breathing. And then cold, clammy hands, blue nail beds and blue lips, tiny pupils. And then you might hear a gurgling sound. So opioids impact the part of the brain that regulates breathing. So when you're hearing that gurgling sound, it's the depression of the lungs. So it causes breath to not flow as well. And then, Daniel, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just, you know, I mean, when we say overdose and when we say that it's you know, slowing down people's respiratory system, that's really what is the killer there. You know, when people stop breathing, if you stop breathing, that's really why people end up dying, is because their brain just sort of shuts off that breathing. And so everything kind of that we do when we're in a response scenario is associated with making sure that their body's getting enough oxygen and that their brain is able to start actually breathing for itself again. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go into the training section. But we're still going to talk a little bit more about how overdoses happen and a little bit more about addiction as well.
Yes. Okay, so one thing that can cause an overdose is an unfamiliar supply or a change in quality. Sometimes people stop using drugs for a short amount of time and their tolerance is lowered, like their tolerance lowers. And then they go back to using and they use the same amount that they were previously using, and that can cause an overdose. And then also the changes in quality. Sometimes if you're injecting an opioid, you may not know what is in it. It can be laced with other drugs, and which makes it stronger, which can also cause an overdose. So if you're relying on somebody else to inject you and you don't really know, that can also cause an overdose. As it says below, this is often a problem for women who have their partners inject them. Daniel, did you want to add?
Sure. Yeah. So oftentimes everyone's body is really different. And so we need to kind of be aware of that if we are going to be using heroin or any other kind of opioid, is that each person who's using should be sort of responsible for whatever they're putting in their own body. And so with that, I want to warn people as well about fentanyl, that drug that we were talking about earlier. It's a really, really potent opioid that's become notorious for causing a lot of overdoses, and that's because it is so potent. And it's associated with a lot of drug cartels, as far as illegally, in the street drug scene. It's been coming up more and more into the North Coast region, and we've been reporting, and we've seen more reports of these cases where people were taking drugs, some not even intending to be taking opioids. One case in particularly last holiday season, someone was going to do meth up in Oregon, and they ended up having it laced with heroin or laced with fentanyl, and it caused an overdose. And so those kinds of things, like really making sure that we are aware of where we're getting the drugs from, and if there are any changes of quality, we need to be aware of that before we take those drugs. There are fentanyl test kits, and there are groups in our community, especially in Humboldt, that give fentanyl test strips, and we'll talk more about that in the future when we talk about our resources. But just something to keep in mind as well, as far as drugs in our area, how they're changing. All right.
For that. I also just wanted to add the explanation of tolerance. So drugs over time, your body builds up a tolerance for the drug. If that tolerance is lowered and you decide to stop using for, it could be a short amount of time or longer amount of time, and then you continuously use the same amount of drug you used to use, that can be very detrimental to your body. Okay, moving on to the next slide. And then we wanted to talk about historical trauma. Opioids are most of the time used for physical pain, but people may use them for emotional pain as well. Unfortunately, in the Native community, there has been a lot of historical trauma, and that trauma can be manifested through ways including alcohol and substance abuse. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to kind of break down that definition of historical trauma, you know, it's the cumulative, multi-generational, collective experience of emotional and psychological injury in communities and in descendants. So this can be something that's been passed down from generation to generation. And it's historical trauma is often referred to in circles that discuss this heavily as a gateway drug in and of itself. And that's something that when we keep in mind, or when we, you know, think about, oh, we need to have more people going into treatment or really fixing up their lives or whatever, you know, we need to keep in mind that the folks here right now who are struggling with substance use disorder in our communities, they could also be dealing with levels of historical trauma. And as a community, that needs to be faced. And so we need to build our own courage as a community to acknowledge the historical traumas that have gone on within you know, communities of color and you know, communities of that are disproportionately affected by colonialism and a lot of the ills, if you will, of society. And that's when we can actually start moving forward to healing our people throughout this region. And so it is a really kind of important piece in recovery to recognize what's going on socially as well in our people's lives, and why are they you know, why are we falling into these traps of opioid use disorder or substance use disorder? So yeah. Lori, do you have anything else to add? I know you just came on at a great time. We're talking about historical trauma. Didn't mean to catch you off guard again, but
Yeah,
we can move.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, it like Ari said, it manifests in different faces, and when we're approached by people, it's hard to recognize, because some people have things going on and they don't have the words or the emotions to handle what's going on. They don't know. They don't even know why they're ultimately upset. And it might be just the incidents in front of them. So it's a consequence that many people through therapy or through circle talks or just talking with people of their friends, they figure out, God, this isn't really about me. This is what's happened to me. And maybe something that they don't even have words or a story from their past. And then they get told when they get older, thinking that people are being guarded or not having to face those consequences yet as a young person. So I think it's a crucial thing in this area. Thank you for including me.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay.
So now we want to get into some of the rates and figures and some of the data that we have in our area. And please forgive us, because right now some of this data is it's getting outdated, and it's crazy because, you know, some of this is really like the most recent that we've got so far is from 2017, which is a particularly bad year that we've seen in this area. And there is more data coming out, and we hope actually within the coming presentations to have some more updated information. But we do want to just at least trace this progress, because it is important for us to get an understanding of what the context is today, and, you know, sort of in this time period. So starting off, we've got a map of California in 2000 and in 2016, and we're tracking overdose rates here. So the bluer the field is, the less opioid overdoses. You can tell that in 2000, Humboldt still had a pretty high rate compared to the rest of the state, if not the highest rate, or tied with another county up here. But this area has already kind of seen the impacts, you know, fairly early on, but there's not a whole lot of data surrounding the opioid overdoses before 2000 either. That's when really a lot of folks started to kind of be aware of, oh, there's an opioid epidemic going on. And this had to do with a lot of the overprescription of opioid medications through the health systems that we have. And particularly the Indian health system was notorious for really just overprescribing medications to their population. And they had a variety of explanations for why they were prescribing so much. However, we can just see the effects of that when we go 16 years into the future in 2016. And now, you know, Humboldt County is really just kind of off the charts, and Del Norte has been significantly impacted as well through that overprescription of opioid medications. And really, you know, you can kind of look at the North Coast region. It's pretty, you know, it's definitely made its move towards the more red colors. So, yeah, let's go to the next slide.
So Daniel, can we
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
if we're not able to see this picture, and this is a really good picture of the concentrate, and if I weren't able to see this picture, listening on the viewer's view, that he's talking about the blue is 2 to 30 per 100,000, and in which on the map it shows that we're like in the bluer area, and if I were to describe what it is in 2016, which is 30 plus in 100,000 rate, the blue turned into a dark blue, which went from the numbers 2 to 30 plus extreme in the 6 years of development of the state keeping track of the overdoses. And so it tells a bigger story about drugs being trafficked, the agencies keeping track of the criminal behaviors and acts and arrests, and then all the other things that officials track. And the concentrates are in Northern California, which relays not having the agencies and police force to be able to track and make and control the drug and trafficking going on in the northern part of the state. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to take this one, Ariana?
Sure. So this is the overdose rate from 2016. So people in Humboldt County die from drug poisoning at more than double the national rate. As you can see on the map, all of the red and dark burgundy spots are the over 30 overdoses. And they've been doing that for more than a century, as you can see where the Yurok reservation is. And then Daniel, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, this just kind of goes over, these are the hotspots in the United States. This was just 2016 data. But you can see over in the East Coast, this is where a lot of the coal industry has kind of collapsed, and up in Appalachia, where a lot of people sort of started to notice that the opioid epidemic was going on. There's a lot of coverage of that. But then we also see in the Southwest, there's quite a few Native American communities that have been affected by this opioid epidemic. And in these regions, there are a lot of Native communities. And it's just something, we try to keep in mind, because this issue is disproportionately affecting the Native community. And, obviously every life is very important, and we don't want to lose any more. But something just to keep in mind is that, going through genocide and other, traumas in their history, when our Native communities are also hit by an opioid crisis, it's almost like another act of genocide. And this really is, just another thing that we need to fight in order to restore our communities and heal. So yeah.
So these are the opioid prescription rates based off zip codes 95548 and 95546. Over 51,841 opioid pills were prescribed for only 4,867 residents. So that's on average 10.6 opioid pills per resident, which is entirely too high. So I know Daniel did touch on the subject about overprescription. To have 10.6 pills per resident is way too many to use at one time. And that's oftentimes how a lot of people get addicted to these opioids. And then Daniel, do you want to touch on the pill rates?
Yeah. So I mean, if people were wondering how some of these opioids sort of end up on the street as well, a lot of it is from the medicine cabinet that's either being used recreationally or stolen to then be used recreationally or party with. And that is, if you're wondering how that happens, this is kind of how that happens. You have overprescription and then, medicine that wasn't used, and you've got a situation where kids are getting into these kinds of drugs and using them, or experimenting with them, and it's just really a dangerous situation that we have. You have 10.6 opioid pills for every man, woman, and child, in this community, and that's just way too much. So this is just from the January 2018, and that's kind of that data. But in some of the meetings that we've been attending throughout the community, in RxSafe Humboldt meeting, we had noticed that actually in the COVID times, progress that had been made at reducing the prescription level had actually been brought back to some of the same levels that we were seeing before, because people were saying, well, you know, if you can't get your prescription as often, maybe we need to give you some more, you know, just on the head. And so we've been moving, you know, back towards this trend, and we really don't want to see this happen again, or have COVID as an excuse to jumpstart another, you know, bad episode in this opioid epidemic. So the progress that we can make, if we can hold on to it, that is better. And the only way that we're going to be able to hold on to making this progress is by informing the public about what's going on here, and you know, having everyone who's attending these trainings know more about, you know, what's going on in our community, because we need to advocate for our family and friends to not you know, be put in dangerous situations with the medication that they get from their doctors. So
I just wanted to emphasize the fact that these opioid pills are prescribed to people to manage pain, and that it is not the patient's fault, you know, on why these opioids get misused. Unfortunately, because there isn't always access to a doctor, these opioids become something that are overprescribed, and then especially in elder situations where children have contact with these pills, they end up on the street. It isn't necessarily their fault at all. I just wanted to emphasize that fact. Okay, so we can move on to the opioid overdose death rate. So as you can see for Del Norte County, Native Americans are the highest, unfortunately, and then also for Humboldt County, they are also the highest on the graph. So this is the graph for deaths per 100,000 residents in California. And this graph is presented by Public Health Cures database. This is for 2017, but a lot of these statistics are still the same. Daniel, did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is just to kind of like reiterate what we're saying already. I mean, I think this graph really hits the nail on the head. Who's bearing the brunt of the opioid epidemic? Who's bearing the weight here? And we can see with this graph that our Native American community is definitely carrying a lot of it. And obviously, we want all of these numbers to be at zero, but we really need to address, you know, the folks. We need to address our communities that are being impacted the most right now. So.
Okay. Okay, and then we can move on to how to reverse an overdose using Narcan or Naloxone. And then I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Malaya so she can show the video.
So as Malaya's kind of getting this put together, I just want to give a quick sort of intro. So I know there was kind of a lot of doom and gloom that we just sort of talked about, and what we just talked about was pretty heavy. But now we want to really change the feel of this presentation to go into, okay, we know there's a problem. How do we find the solution for it? And so this video that we're showing you is really kind of building a solution for, you know, what you can do today and what you can do in an emergency situation to make sure that no other person is dying from an opioid overdose. And at the last part of our presentation, we're going to be talking about resources. And so that's sort of like, you know, how can we build a better tomorrow by either referring folks, family members or friends to different resources in the community that will either, help them just have a safer community, but also, maybe even get them into treatment and recovery. So yeah, no further ado, let's learn how to use this Narcan.
For this demonstration, I will be going over once again the scare me tactic and showing you how to properly administer naloxone. What we will want to do is start with S, stimulate. Remember, yell their name, shake them gently, and remember to stimulate the individual by giving them a sternum rub, which you will rub the knuckles firmly in the middle of their chest. If the individual does not respond, this is an overdose that needs your attention. Next, you will move on to C for call 911. If you are intimidated by calling 911, you can tell the operator that the person is unconscious and is not breathing. If possible, have someone else make the call and you can focus on the next steps. I do want to take this time to remind everyone of the Naloxone in California laws. AB 635 protects doctors and other licensed professionals who prescribe or distribute naloxone from civil or criminal liability. AB 472, also known as the California Good Samaritan Law, protects people who call 911 at the scene of an overdose from prosecution for possession of usable amounts of controlled substances. Again, it can be intimidating to call 911, but you must remember to always call 911 in the event of an overdose. This could save their life, and you must remember that naloxone is not an alternative for medical treatment. Next, we will move on to A for airway. Remember to check their breathing. Make sure that there is nothing in the individual's mouth that could get in the way of breathing. If possible, please use your gloves if you are going to check their airways with your hands. Gloves will be included in your RX Safe Del Norte naloxone kits. Again, make sure to check their breathing and make sure that there is nothing in the individual's mouth that could get in the way of breathing. Now you will move on to rescue breaths. For rescue breaths, make sure you have your mouth guard, which is also included in your RX Safe Del Norte naloxone kit, and cover their mouth with the mouth guard. This is for the safety of you and the person that you are giving rescue breaths. Once you have placed the mouth guard, what you're going to want to do is pinch their nose, tilt their head back, jaw lifted up, and give them 2 breaths every 5 seconds for 2 minutes. Remember to also take 2 breaths for yourself. You do not want to pass out in the event of assisting someone in an overdose. Check to see if breathing has resumed. Now you will move on to E for evaluate. Again, you can try stimulating, maybe try the sternum rub, and see if they're responding. Check their airways, and check to see if they're breathing on their own. If not, it is time to administer naloxone. Now you'll move on to M for medication. You are going to administer the naloxone nasal spray. The naloxone nasal spray is included in your RX Safe Del Norte naloxone kit. Take out the blister pack and peel back the packaging. Take out the naloxone nasal spray. You will put your 2 forefingers on the top of the nasal spray and place your thumb gently on the plunger at the bottom. Do not press the plunger until you are ready to fully administer the naloxone. You want to make sure they receive the full dose of naloxone. Now you will place the naloxone nasal spray into their nostril, and you will make sure that their head is tilted up and back and their jaw is lifted. If you'd like, you can hold their neck for support. Now, you will take your thumb and you will plunge the entire dose of naloxone into their nose. Once you have done this, you can move on to the last E, which is also evaluate. Is the individual aware and responding? Are they breathing? If they are still not breathing, continue rescue breaths for another 2 minutes, and then if need be, administer the second dose of naloxone. To administer the second dose of naloxone, remember, what you are going to do is repeat the previous steps, but you are going to administer it into the opposite nostril. If the individual is still not breathing, continue rescue breaths for as long as possible or until help arrives.
Thank you, Malaya. And I'm going to put the link for that video actually in the Zoom webinar chat. So if folks want to watch that again, you guys are more than welcome to. And yeah, I really love the video that you guys do. You break down the Scare Me kind of procedure in order to, save someone from an opioid overdose. A couple of things that I want to highlight before we get into the next section is calling 911 is just so important, especially in areas that are more remote, like any of the areas really between Eureka and Crescent City. They tend to be more remote, and actually like upwards between Trinidad and Crescent City. You see times that our first responders get to those areas, especially on our tribal lands in Hupa or on the Yurok reservation, just takes so long. And so, if anyone's watching from over in that area, this is something to kind of keep in mind, is you want to call 911 and then administer Narcan, because the Narcan is only going to work for 20 to 90 minutes. Before the opioids sort of come back to the brain, if you will, and it buys time for people. I have heard horror stories where someone did not call 911, and even though the person woke up after administering naloxone, they said, okay, no, everything's fine, don't call 911. And so, the person didn't call 911 for their friend. And when everyone woke up in the morning, there was one person who didn't, and that was, the person who had previously gotten the Narcan before. So that all had to do with being convinced not to call 911 after the Narcan was administered. So honestly, don't give yourself an opportunity to be convinced to not call 911. Just call 911. Get the first responders on the way, and stay with the person and tell them everything's going to be okay. And yeah, I mean, we can't afford to be losing any more people from our community. That's just sort of why we need to make sure that 911 is called. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize the fact that yes, you do need to call 911 first. But if you're unsure whether it's an opioid overdose or not, please go ahead and administer the Narcan, since Narcan does not have any negative side effects to it. And you only need to distribute one dose in one nostril at a time. Okay. And then we can move on to the types of resources. Okay, so we have this symbol with the lightning bolt, that is the naloxone distributor. So that is the places where you can get naloxone or Narcan. These are the areas where they provide Narcan. And then we have the medical disposal bin. That is a disposal bin you can use when you have or may have been prescribed any overprescribed opioids, and you need to dispose of them. That is a safe place where you can dispose of them so that they don't end up in the wrong hands. And then we do have syringe exchanges. That is when if you have a used syringe that you would like to dispose of correctly, there are boxes that you can dispose of them in, and then you can exchange them for a new needle, just so that there is no diseases or any type of unintentional transactions. And then we also have HIV services for anyone wanting to get tested or who is going through HIV. And then, Daniel, did you want to talk about the free sock and foot care clinic?
Yeah, so, taking care of our feet is an important thing, and it's especially important for people who are really in the throes of opioid use disorder, and, who are actually looking for, new places to inject their drugs. And for heroin in particular, if you're looking for new veins to do it, some people will look for their feet. And so taking care of their feet, keeping them clean and keeping them healthy is very important in that situation. And so there is a resource that we have identified in Humboldt that actually offers, a foot care clinic to help folks who are struggling with opioid use disorder take care of their feet, keep them clean. And so that's just something we want to highlight because it shows sort of the variety of resources that can actually really help someone who's in the throes of opioid use disorder.
All right, thank you for that. And then we move on to the types of treatment. If you are looking to get clean, there are detox services that can help you get a bed so that you can work on recovery. There are also services prioritizing pregnant women with substance abuse disorders. So that is signified by the heart. Also another rehab and recovery, and then sober living. Okay, and then lastly, we have the crisis services. If you ever feel like you are in a crisis, if it's an emergency situation, please call 911, but we do have crisis lines where we have somebody available to listen and kind of help you through any situation that you're going through. Same thing kind of with the warm line. And then we have, did you want to talk about, Daniel, did you want to talk about the mobile response team?
Yeah, so mobile response team is a team of folks who, I think this is also based in Humboldt County, and they will actually respond to different crises as they're happening, and just put their phone number down there because if there is a crisis that's going on, these might also be folks that you'd want to call to the scene to help out. And this the crises they don't have to just be overdose related. They can be just in general mental health or behavioral health types of crises. So yeah.
Okay. And then these are the resources for Del Norte County. There is Open Door Community Health Center in Crescent City and Health and Human Services. The numbers are listed there as well. So typically they're open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that is during the week, so Monday through Friday. And then we have the Humboldt County Resources, the Aegis Treatment Center. It opens on July 15th, or it had opened on July 15th. Crossroads, Healthy Moms, Humboldt Recovery Center, Waterfront Recovery, Hatcher, North Coast AIDS Project, and then Open Door Community Health. So it's also located in Arcata. Did you want to add anything to this, Daniel?
Yeah, so RX Safe Del Norte also is a Narcan distributor up in Del Norte, and I'll put their information in the chat here. But you can also, I mean, you can reach out to them on Facebook, as well as through email. I know a lot of them kind of have their, or there is a lot of contact information actually on the Facebook as well. So I'll just kind of remind people about that. Yeah.
Okay.
But and then one of our real kind of like main hubs for a lot of harm reduction resources in Humboldt County is Hatcher, the Humboldt Area Community Harm Reduction group, and they offer syringe exchanges, Narcan, HIV services, and they also, have that foot care clinic, and they're really responsive. So if you are, kind of looking for services outside of the times that they have listed for their services at their physical location, you can always give them a call, and they even do drop-offs. So they're just like a really great community resource, and it's a great place to kind of tell people about as well, because even if folks are still using opioids, and we do want them to move into the recovery stage, if you will, we have to keep people alive. And so part of that is, if they're using drugs, they need to use it in a safe way so that they don't have any other kind of health complications going on in their lives. So that's why Hatcher is just, they really are helping hold up our community and give folks really the opportunity to engage with recovery and treatment services in the future. So just want to give them their credit. But yeah. And we also have North Coast AIDS Project. They also do the HIV services, the syringe exchange, and Narcan, another great group. And our Open Door Community Health Center, Health and Wellness Centers. All of these are the health and wellness centers that have substance use disorder and behavioral health services. So if you live near either one of these kind of regions, Arcata has two different ones. But if you are interested in kind of contacting anyone from any of these offices, these are the numbers for their respective offices. And then Semper Virens is our psychiatric hospital nearby, and they are the ones with that mobile response team as well. So you can make crisis calls to them. You can also kind of call them to ask them if they can come to you. So yeah.
And then I also wanted to emphasize that all these places are open. I know due to COVID, the COVID-19 pandemic, hours can be a little tricky, but please give them a call if you're interested in using any of these resources. Some of them do have warm lines you can use if you need to call them, like Daniel said, after hours. So please do. Okay, I'm gonna move on to some tribal resources. So there is the Yurok Tribal Court and the Wellness Program. And then we also have the 24/7 Tribal Youth Line as well. And then as well as United Indian Health Services, you can give them a call. Again, at any time, the numbers are listed below.
And another one that I want to add on here, and I just added it to the chat, is Kamau Medical Center. They have a behavioral health department, and that's the phone number that is associated with that. Now, they have Narcan distribution. They also have syringe exchange. They connect people. They refer them to detox. They also have their own kind of recovery program where people can get MAT services, the Suboxone, and they even have sober living homes up in the Hupa area. And so that's another great resource and a great tribal resource to kind of refer people to and let them know that that's around. And kind of just to wrap up, a lot of this stuff is we've got in each one of our opioid kits that we send out to you for taking this training, we'll have a resource card with all of these resources in them. So if you've been frantically writing down all these phone numbers, no worries. There will be a piece of paper that we're sending out to you that includes all of these phone numbers and all of this kind of information about what to look for from each one of these groups. And yeah, so we appreciate all of these groups for being around and the resources that they are providing for our community. We also recognize that there's still a lot more work to be done. It is hard to find kind of like a syringe exchange actually within the Yurok reservation, and especially during COVID. UIHS was doing it for a while, but they had to dial back on their syringe distribution due to COVID-19, and so that's a major need that we have because we need to make sure that everyone's able to access clean syringes, because we don't want any other health outbreaks to be going on at the same time. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk, Ari.
Yeah, not a problem. But yes, I just wanted to emphasize the idea of needle exchanges. Like you did say, some of the needle exchanges need to be dialed back because of COVID. But there are certain times I know United Indian Health Service, I believe, has a certain time available for needle exchanges. They're not doing as many, but we need to have that access to that so that there is less, diseases spreading, especially, when it comes to hepatitis. So.
And so one last thing is I would like to kind of draw people's attention to the link I put in the chat for more resources online. There is the North Coast Health Improvement Information Network, or INCHIN. They have a resource hub that has a bunch of resources listed, and you can actually sort through them to kind of see what you'd like to find out more about. And not all of them are just opioid related or anything, but it's a great place to go to find out about all the resources that we have in this area. And so I really strongly recommend going to that website and kind of sticking around and seeing. And honestly, if you're a member of another resource and you guys are offering services and you don't see your information on there, please reach out to them, because we need to inform as many people as we can of the resources that our community has to actually fight this opioid epidemic. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening to our presentation and taking on this responsibility. At this point, I think we'll field some questions, and then we'll close the presentation. So I know we've got someone checking the questions on Facebook, and then I see a couple of the questions in the question and answer section in our chat on Zoom. I think we can start with some of those. And I know we've got someone who's also been answering these in the chat, but we'll give them some attention. So one question was, are you seeing an increase in these numbers over the last 4 years? And this section had to do actually with some of the local data that we were seeing and some of the local use. So actually, we have been seeing a decrease, because there's been a lot of action around, opioid coalitions and groups within the Indian health system, as well as, our other, like the Open Door and Humboldt IPA and kind of like private networks and public networks of healthcare. They've all been working together to decrease the amount that we're prescribing in areas. However, that's only fixing one side of the issue. And so while some of the prescription numbers might be going down, our opioid deaths were not necessarily going down. And that's where we're kind of seeing like, oh, well, the people who were turned away from their doctor to get their opioid medications because they had developed a use disorder, were now turning to the streets to get their medication, if you will. And what that is showing really is that in some ways, because there's less data collected around, well, how much heroin are we getting, are people getting access to in the streets? We don't really know that. We don't really have a good way of tracking that. The only thing that we have that's telling us that is the opioid overdose rate. And, when people are being tested after, they pass away, and then we find that there's fentanyl in their system, that's when it's like, oh no, okay, all right. So now we have even worse opioids that are coming into our area.
Thank you for answering that. So there was another question from Facebook. It says, if someone gives Narcan and they're not using opioids, will it hurt someone? And I just want to answer that. So Narcan cannot hurt anyone. There is no negative side effects to Narcan. So even if you are unsure whether it's an opioid overdose, you can go ahead and call 911 first and then administer the Narcan. If it is an opioid overdose, typically that will bring the person back breathing. If it is not, again, call 911 and try to do rescue breathing. But no, Narcan will not hurt you if you use it.
Yeah, and I think, if you're unsure if the person is not using opioid, really kind of taking the time to look at the signs of the overdose is really important. Ari talked about this in the beginning of the presentation, and then they talked about it in the video as well. But some of the signs, some of the telltale signs are if that person is not responding to any loud noises or a sternum rub or something, pull open their eyes and take a look at the pupils. If they're pinpoint, you've got a high possibility that they are on opioids. Another thing is if their lips are looking blue or their nails are looking blue, really, all signs are kind of like pointing towards the opioid overdose. If they're overdosing on something else, like Ari said, you can still, give them Narcan and make sure that they're breathing, and if they're not breathing, give those rescue breaths, because that's what's going to get the oxygen kind of back into their system and lessen the likelihood of them getting seriously damaging their brain from a lack of oxygen. But it's a very serious situation anyway. So the most that you can do is give them Narcan, give them the rescue breaths, and especially call 911 as soon as you can. Yeah. Oh, and Rhonda Tripp is putting the medically assisted treatment program, the phone number, in the Zoom chat right now, 530-625-4261. Thank you, Rhonda, for that.
And we do have another question in the Q&A section, And they asked, can Narcan interfere with psych meds someone may be taking?
Go ahead.
So I haven't heard of that anyway. And in all the Narcan kind of like medication document that they have actually in each Naloxone kit, they don't talk about it interfering with other medications, aside obviously from opioid medications that people might be taking. So I'm going to say no, but yeah.
So yes, I'm gonna also agree with you and say no. So Narcan is used specifically for opioids. So it kind of takes out or it makes you withdraw from opioids. But any other medication, I do not believe that it interferes with that.
I think something that I want to kind of highlight though is, thank you, Angie, for bringing up that question about Narcan interfering with psych meds, because we do find that people a lot of times when they're overdosing from opioids, it's because they're mixing the opioid with another kind of medication. And so a common medication that ends up causing, the opioid overdose is when people are taking benzos or a benzodiazepine or anti-anxiety medication, which is a pretty common psych med. And so when people are taking those, if they're also taking opioids at the same time, whether it's recreationally or whether, it's prescribed, which a lot of prescribers are actually kind of not doing that anymore. They used to be doing that, and that was causing a lot of havoc, in our communities because of the loss of life and the risk of overdose. But now that they've stopped doing that, if people do still end up in that situation where they're taking both, their risk for overdose highly increases. However, when the person takes Narcan, or when administering Narcan in a situation where someone's got an opioid overdose, the Narcan is actively working to free up the opioid receptors. It's not working on any of the other medications. It's just working on the opioids. And that, if someone was drinking alcohol and using opioids at the same time, again, the Narcan is going to affect the opioids in that situation. They're still going to be drunk. But yeah, now, we do say that there are no side effects from Narcan. There's no like long-term kind of side effects. But when someone is coming out of an opioid high, like, it is good to be aware of the fact that the high is being knocked out. And if that person has like an opioid dependency, that they could start going through kind of like withdrawals and feeling sick. But those are associated with the dependency that they have in their body for the opioids. It's not necessarily like the Narcan that's causing it. It's really their need for the opioids in their body.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that. So when you administer Narcan, like Daniel said, it is knocking out the opioid out of your body. So the person kind of feels like they're going through immediate withdrawal. So they may wake up angry or disoriented, which is why it's very important for you to call 911, just so that you do not get harmed in the process.
Yeah. And then Kyle Winton in the chat on Zoom really does drive the point home as well. Narcan is an opioid antagonist. That's the kind of drug that it is. Opioid antagonist, which means it binds to the cell receptor, or the receptors that opioids attach to in the cells. And so it should only affect the opioids. So, yeah. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, do we have any more, Malaya? Do you know?
I'm not seeing any at the moment.
Right. Well, let's talk about the kind of next steps for the training. So your training is now complete. Thank you everyone for staying tuned the whole time to kind of watch this and get some good information and learn about how to save lives in your community. I'm putting in the chat on Zoom right now the link to our survey. This is where we'll be collecting that. We have a little post test that we ask if you can do, and then take a small survey where you'll kind of like tell us, give us your feedback about our training. And then there's some information about your experiences with overdoses, and then finally your address information so that we can send you your kits, your certificate for participating today and becoming trained. Again, thank you for taking on this responsibility to become an opioid safety net tender. And then also your $50 stipend, because everyone who participates in this training is getting a $50 stipend for taking on this responsibility for the community. And it's just a token of our appreciation for being ready to save a life in the event that you would need to. So, yeah.
Yes.
All right, do you have any final words?
Thank you everyone for participating and becoming a member of the community and being responsible. And then please do, like Daniel said, please do fill out the survey, our post survey, so that you can receive your $50 stipend, your certificate, and your Narcan. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you to our presenters for that amazing workshop and getting us all trained up on how to use Narcan. I think it's so important and something that everyone should know and have on them. Well, I just want to again say thank you to our presenters and everyone watching today. You're all awesome, like they said. There is a link in the chat. It is going to be on the Facebook as well as in the Zoom of their evaluation you will need to fill so that you can receive your Narcan. So if you stay tuned for this whole thing, make sure you fill that out and you will get an incentive and your certification. Hey, Ari, do you mind if you could stop share for a second? Wonderful, thank you. So again, I just want to share their link here, which is going to be in the chat. Oops. To be able to receive your certification and your Narcan. We are the Wellness and Recovery series, and we appreciate you all for joining us. And I just want to again thank the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition for hosting this awesome training today, this morning. And yeah, it is our 4th week. We are getting close. We have 1 more week left. Today's the last day of the 4th week. So it's been wonderful to have you all. And we hope you join us for the last week, learn some new stuff, join in on Wellness Wednesday, and there will be another Narcan training or net tender training next week. So to stay updated on everything going on for this Wellness and Recovery series, make sure you register through Eventbrite. I know we only have 1 week left, but you can still register and get info and updates on what's going to be happening for this next week, and some info on what's already happened if you'd like to know more. We'll still be doing live presentations Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday until July 30th. This will include speaker, panel series, a few videos, activities, and then we still have some social media campaigns going on for the last week. This series will be going out Zoom and Facebook Live as well. And if you want to stay up to date and informed, make sure you register on your Eventbrite, or make sure to check in on it if you already have. You can also follow us on Facebook at the Wellness and Recovery series if you want some more information. We still have the Wellness Art Challenge going on. The deadline is Monday. Make sure you download the PDF on our Wellness and Recovery Facebook page, or if you registered for the Eventbrite, it is also, you're able to access it there. So we just ask that you draw what your wellness activity is, and you don't have to draw it. You can use any medium, photo, writing, collage, the sky's the limit. But just let us know what are some things you do in order to keep your mind and spirit healthy. So we ask that if you do participate, take a picture, scan it in, and you can upload it on social media and use the hashtags HealthyDelNort and hashtag Wellness Challenge, or you can email it to us directly at rxsafedelnort@gmail.com. We'll be sharing the art, so make sure that you have the artist's name and their age group. The age groups are 0 to 5, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 14 to 24, and 24 up is adults. You'll be entered in a raffle just for participating. And again, we're not going to judge your artistic skills or anything. It's for fun. So everyone, you're totally welcome to join in. And again, we have 1 week left. It is our last day for the 4th week. So we just completed the Narcan training. We're actually going to be taking a break this afternoon for the 23rd and just, take a little bit of a break before we get into next week, which is going to be our last big week. So next week, we got a bunch of workshops going on, amazing presentations, and on Friday, we will be having, or Thursday, Thursday, the 30th, we'll be having another Narcan training, net tender training from the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition at the same time, same link, and we'll be making sure to post that event as well up on Facebook and the Eventbrite. So stay up to date on there and encourage your friends and family to come train up next week, because everyone should have it and everyone should know. So we encourage you to get other people to come and join. And then on the 30th, we'll be having our closeout event. So we'll be announcing the raffles and just kind of giving our goodbyes and thank yous to all of you. So make sure you join us on that, and it'll be a fun little goodbye to everyone. And again, we're the Wellness and Recovery series. Check out our Facebook page at rxsafedelnort and our Eventbrite. And again, I just want to reiterate that the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition has their own evaluation for their training today that you will need to fill out so that you can receive your Narcan. So make sure you fill that out. The link is in the chat. We also have our own evaluation here with RX Safe Del Norte, just to make sure that we're keeping track of everyone coming through. And if you fill one out, you get an entry into our wellness raffle, which will be announced on our last day on the 30th. So make sure you fill that out. It's just a few little questions, nothing complicated, and you'll be entered in our raffle. And again, stay up to date with us on Facebook, and you can check out the RX Safe Del Norte website, the RX Safe Del Norte Facebook, and this is the link to our presenters. And I do want to share, oops.
Hey, Malaya, can I say something really quick as
Yeah,
well?
of course.
Sure. So I know a lot of people have been, like, we probably are noticing that the net tenders, is coming up on Facebook and stuff. We just really do want to push that the folks that are filling out our survey, we are cross-referencing with RX Safe Del Norte. We want to make sure everyone is registered so that they're getting the credit for setting up this space, really, for us to have this wellness and recovery series and this training for you guys. So please, if you've watched this, make sure that you're registered and register for this, and then take our survey, take their survey. We need to get all the information that we can to kind of help make these events better and great for our community. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Yeah, so please remember to fill out their evaluation. And we also just want to remind everyone that if you or someone can't make any of the trainings or workshops we've done in the past, we have them all on our RX Safe Del Norte YouTube page. So if you would like to go back and watch any of those, you're totally welcome to. And the links for the evals will be in the description, so you can still get your eval in and get that raffle entry. So make sure you go check out our YouTube for some more of the trainings and panels and presentations we've had throughout the month. And we'll be including all of them, including this video, on our YouTube page. So again, just thank you to everyone for joining us today. We appreciate having you all. A huge thank you to our presenters, the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. And we will see you again next week, same time. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.